Are you in control of your actions, or are you just following orders? In today's video, I'm going to talk about social obedience to authority and how it's affected and shaped our history, how it's affecting our present and your life today, and why this is the most serious matter, because this is the difference between us actually having peace or war. This is the difference between us being good to one another or committing genocide. So let's start with World War II and Adolf Hitler. Adolf Hitler was a dictator who started something called the Nazi Party. He executed 6 million Jews. In total, he executed 11 million people in death camps because he wanted to and because he had the authority. He had the authority to take the average individual, the average German, who was not Jewish, and was able to convince them to rat out Jews or neighbors who were hiding Jews to the SS, damn well knowing that these people would be executed and tortured. The average soldier who grew up, maybe even religious, would go into a village with 5 or 10 other people where there were 1,000 or 2,000 people, round them up, and execute them one at a time. Imagine standing there and they line up 10 people on their knees in front of a mass grave. Your mother, your grandmother, your cousin, your sister are all there on their knees. And yet, everyone stood there and waited their turn to die. That is social obedience. The average soldier who would never hurt a fly, who's now executing innocent people because a position of authority told them to do it. That is social obedience. This is such a serious matter that I want to emphasize. I am the world's #1 hypnotist, and I can tell you now, there are instances of this happening to you every single day. Why does someone stop at a red light in the middle of the night at 3 a.m.? Why does someone stop at a stop sign? There's no one there. You're not going to get caught. Why do you stop? Because just that sign, the idea of someone catching you, has enough power to influence your decision. So let's dive a little bit deeper. Let's talk about a more recent example. This happened in the year 2000. It's called the Abu Ghraib scandal. And what this is pretty much American soldiers were taking other prisoners and other people and torturing them, sexually abusing them, taking photos with them smiling, murdering them, their dead bodies, because a high-ranking official, someone with authority, told them to do it. You may not understand how serious this is yet, but let me show you exactly why this happens. So a man named Stanley Milgram asked himself, how could something like the Holocaust happen? Everyone asks, how can something like that happen? So Stanley Milgram was sitting there and he was watching all these Nazis go on trial for acts of terror, acts against humanity. And when asked why they committed these atrocities, why they committed genocide, every single one of them said the same thing. They said, I was just following orders. So he thought, well, maybe there's something here. Maybe they're telling the truth. So he created something which turned out to be one of the most famous psychological experiments in the history of the world, called the Milgram experiment. He would take a subject who was a volunteer, and he told them, hey, we're going to actually have you come in, you're going to be a teacher, and you're going to help us do an experiment about education, learning, memory, and how electricity can help us learn faster. So what would happen is the person would come in, he would walk around a wall, he would show them another actor, the subject, the student, and he would say, look, here's a device that's going to electrocute the other person. It's going to shock the other person. Every time they get a question wrong, you're going to shock them. And every time you shock them, you increase the voltage. Simple enough. So they started asking questions. They're on the other side of the wall. The person on the other side of the wall, every time they got shocked, would start screaming. They would say, ow. They would say, my heart hurts, my chest hurts. And eventually they would literally be silent. They would almost be dead. And guess what would happen? Just because the guy in a lab coat told them to keep going, keep shocking them, move on, they would continuously electrocute the other subject. They would do it to the point where the other person would technically be dead. 450 volts. On the button, the control panel in front of them, it said 450 volts. It says danger, do not go here. And yet a man in a lab coat telling them to do it, a position of authority, made them follow those instructions. Now, let me tell you the percentage of people that went all the way to 450 volts of electricity. 65%. This experiment has been replicated over 40 times, and every time it's the same result. 65% of people will literally shock a subject to the point where they'll die, be considered dead, because someone in a lab coat told them to do it in a seemingly harmless environment, in an experiment, something they volunteered for. They're not soldiers, they're people who have ethics, who have values, who have morals, and yet 65% of them, because a position of authority told them to do it, will actually execute another individual. So they came up with another experiment, and you might have heard it. It's called the Stanford prison experiments. And what they took is they took students and they put them in a prison-like environment. And they gave some students guard uniform, and they gave other students prisoner uniforms. And what happened very quickly is the students in guard uniforms became very abusive, very hostile in a position of authority and power, and the prisoners became defeated and obedient to the guards. These are students. They could have just been cordial, they could have cracked jokes, but they started becoming abusive, they started beating up the guards. They had to stop the experiment early because of how extreme it started to get. Now, the results of both of these experiments are very clear. They tell us that human beings, when influenced by a position of authority, will follow instructions that completely destroy anything we've culturally been designed to think is okay. Cultural beliefs go into our values, they go into our morals, they go into our conscience. So what is it that's dictating these people's decisions more than anything else? And this is what we're not educated on, and I would like to educate you here. It is your DNA, it's your evolution. Back in the day, when you were in a tribe, if you would go against the authority of the tribe, the tribal leader, you would die. So by actually following the authority, you are allowing yourself to survive and rationalizing it because you're getting on the good side of the authority figure. So if you kill other people because the authority told you to do it, you are now gonna feel good. Your DNA is programming you to do it. So there are some ethics I'd like to cover here about these experiments. Were these experiments ethical? Honestly, I think they were important. They were important because they educated us on how we work. How could something like the Holocaust happen? However, here are the real life consequences of obeying an authority figure. If the government tells you what to do and you trust them because they're the authority, if the media tells you what to do and you trust them because they're the authority, you now are not doing what you want to do, you're following orders. Most people don't realize this, but they're following orders. Did you want to go to school growing up? Not many people I know wanted to get up every morning and go to school. But you followed the authority of your parents. You followed the authority of the teacher. You followed the authority of your coach if you were in an athletic program. Sometimes it's okay to follow authority. It's part of society. But when the authority figure is making you question your very own morals and values, now we are crossing a line that becomes very dangerous. They did another study where a doctor would tell registered nurses to prescribe medication to patients, and the medication was at an unreasonable dosage. First of all, there was a policy that they were all aware of. You're not supposed to prescribe medication over the phone. The second thing is, the nurses were instructed to deny the prescription if they felt it was incorrect or over the phone. Yet, in 100% of these cases, whenever the doctor would prescribe an unreasonable dosage to the patient, the nurses would go and administer it regardless. And when they investigated the nurses, they concluded that the nurses were acting, quote unquote, without intelligence. When there is an authority figure involved, intelligence, critical thinking, and conscious decision making go out the window. So how can you make yourself immune to authority? And now I want to get into something that I think will protect you and really help the world. So now that you know the facts, and now that you know how this has affected us every single day of our lives, I want to show you how we can make a difference. I want to start a movement. I want to educate people about this because it's so serious that it affects us in our day-to-day lives. Facts are that we are vulnerable to this. And the only way to make people less vulnerable to this is to educate one another, to educate your friends, to educate your families. Because there's one thing that's for sure. Ultimate power ultimately corrupts. We could do what we want, but at the end of the day, we are a victim of whatever leadership ends up leading us. As society as a whole, we need to evolve. We need to evolve to a place where we can be peaceful, where we can have conversations and come to decisions, where we can agree to disagree, where people can live in harmony and not be violent. We can make a difference because the minority over time can influence the majority, and the minority will become an authority if our opinion is consistent. Remember, do not let a few people at the top make decisions for you that can result in the end of the world, that can result in wars, that can result in us committing genocide. We are supposed to be at peace. We are supposed to respect one another. We are supposed to be happy with one another. But when people hold authority, they have the ability to commit chaos, to literally end lives. If you've ever felt peer pressured, if you've ever felt the need to do something because everyone else was doing it, now is the time to take a step back and say, no more. I want you to step up for yourself. I want you to stand up for what you think is right. Become your own authority. Respect your own thoughts. Have confidence in your own beliefs. Learn how to work on yourself so others cannot influence you. As a matter of fact, I encourage you to share this with your friends, with your family, and together let's make a difference. Let me show you on this channel how to become more confident. Let me show you how to make as much money as you possibly could. Let me show you how to have amazing relationships, how people work, how they think, so you can become more powerful, so you can spread the message of peace, so you can take people to the next level. We no longer have to lose millions and millions of lives because of the decisions of a few people in power. Social obedience to authority is one of the biggest cancers in society. It is unfortunately hardwired into our DNA and exploited by those in power. They know that they have the ability to do this, and they leverage it and manipulate us with it. It's time to stand up, become aware of the authorities that are controlling you, and make sure it no longer happens. Share this with your friends and your family. Comment below if you like this video. Make sure you're subscribed, and together let's actually make a difference.